go. Okay, let me get this. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you as we are voting in several states across the country today. I want you to get out and vote, get out and vote, get out and vote. Do not take your vote for granted because it is not a constitutionally, federally protected right. So we need to amend the Constitution to give us all the right to vote, to protect it. And we're still arguing about who's going to vote in America. Can you imagine? And we really should expand the House of Representatives, for example. They've expanded it over the years, and they should have expanded it some time ago. They haven't expanded it, I think, since the early 1900s. And in fact, they've tried to contract it, make it smaller. As the country has grown, Alexander Hamilton's idea, along with the other framers, was that the House of Representatives should grow. It should become bigger. Mm-hmm. Why hasn't that happened? And why is a state that is more than a third Black fighting to get representation? And yes, race matters, gender matters. All of these identities matter. Everyone needs to be represented in the People's House and in Congress in both houses. And in the state legislatures, absolutely. So let's talk about racial gerrymandering. Let's talk about this case at the U.S. Supreme Court with which it wrestles today. Why is it important? Well, it's extremely important, and we're going to talk about that because we lost a congressperson in Louisiana because of a similar case, and then we regained the same guy, Cleo Fields, because they said, well, Louisiana is underrepresented. It's underrepresenting its citizens. So let's talk about this and what are the broader implications for the rest of the country. I want you to meet me on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Bernadette's there, hey, and Snowman and Robert and Dave up in Canada. I'm sending you so much love. I give everyone love, but Dave is tuning in from north of the border. We have love for Canada. Hello. Shalom, Robert. we got love for Canada. Okay, ain't nobody mad at you. And I'm glad you're not holding it against us. But please meet me on Blue Sky, santita.bsky.social. I'm on X at SantitaJ and the Santita Jackson Show. But meet me on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel right now. Please like and share, and the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Let me give you this overview from Reuters. The U.S. Supreme Court grappled last week with a bid by Louisiana officials and civil rights groups to preserve an electoral map that raised the number of Black majority congressional districts in the state and prompted a challenge by non-Black voters. The justices heard arguments in an appeal by state officials and advocacy groups of a lower court's 2024 ruling that found that the map delineating Louisiana's 6 U.S. House of Representative districts with 2 Black majority districts, up from 1 previously, violated the U.S. Constitution's 14th Amendment promise of equal protection. Really, one of our foremost advocates, he and Barbara Arnwine, the Transformative Justice Coalition, this is their bailiwick. This is what they do. One of our foremost advocates, he and Barbara Arnwine really are our foremost advocates for the vote. Indeed, they go to court and deal with these cases all the time. And you have to deal with them. And no one really cares until voting day, which we are in the midst of. April 1st, April Fool's Day. It's not a joke. They are going to be deciding on a Chief Justice for the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. That is of tremendous consequence. A couple of other states are having elections as well. It is election night. The 2026 season has begun. So who will be represented? Dave Daley, the author of Rat Eft, the true story of the secret plan to steal our democracy, the New York Times bestseller, runaway bestseller, told us that Democrats, people on the left, are woefully underrepresented in both houses of Congress, in the U.S. Senate and in the House of Representatives. How is that so? Because of gerrymandering. But he who has the gold makes the rules. And that's where you got to look at states. Because states determine how these maps are drawn and who goes to what, therefore, who goes to Washington, who gets represented, and who does not. So I need you to help me to understand this case and why there are strange bedfellows, Attorney Daryl Jones, in this case, to put it. I mean, to put it that way. I mean, what is this case about? Because we had Cleo Fields, Congressman Cleo Fields, who lost his seat because he was gerrymandered out of his seat, which meant a sizable swath of the citizenry in Louisiana, which is more than 30% Black, were not represented in Congress. That's not right. So, what is this case about? What are we looking at here?
Well, you're exactly on the mark, Santita. This case is completely about gerrymandering. It's completely about redistricting. It's completely about racial politics. What it comes down to is this: in the state of Louisiana, there's a little greater than 30% of the population there that's African American. That would make it sufficient to justify having more than one congressional representative that goes to Congress, similar to the Alabama case, Alabama versus Milligan, where we went through this same argument, the same almost identical numbers of percentage of African American population, and of course, out of that, the Supreme Court gave us the Milligan decision, which increased the congressional representatives in the state of Alabama, and thus we ended up with Congressman figures that's in place. So now this is the same Congress. This is the same Supreme Court that's hearing the case now in Louisiana. What has happened in Louisiana, and I would probably make the case that Louisiana is probably should be, under normal circumstances, an easier leap than the Milligan case. Here's why. In the Louisiana case, what we're dealing with there is a situation where, yes, there is a greater than 30% population of African American voters that are there that would justify a second congressional representative. But in addition to that, out of the state of Louisiana, one of the things that's coming out of there, right, is that you have the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who comes out of Louisiana, as well as Steve Scalise, who is also in leadership with Congress. Well, why is that important, you ask? Well, what has happened is that once they recognized that there was an underrepresentation in a very prima facie case, or on its face case of a violation of the Voting Rights Act of '65 because of what's happening with the Black voters, they move forward to try to push forward on that issue, that there's a violation of the Voting Rights Act. What the state legislature did, and this is where it distinguishes from Alabama, what the state legislature did is it recognized that if the lines were drawn by a federal judge, which is the threat that was there, that if the state legislature couldn't come up with an acceptable map for that took into consideration a second minority majority district, that the federal judge would do it. And the federal judge could draw the lines however he or she wanted to draw them. Well, what came to the minds of the state legislatures at that point was, well, wait a minute, we need to protect the Speaker of the House that's currently in place, and we need to protect the other leadership, Steve Scalise, Congressman Scalise, who's also in place. So what we're going to do, we're going to certainly be certain we put together a district, a legislative district that's a second majority minority district. However we do it. And so they did it, and it's the snaky looking thing that winds us all the way through. But at the end of the day, they put together that second majority minority district. So you're asking, how does that differ from Alabama? Here's how it differs. The state legislature in Louisiana did it for the purpose of protecting the Speaker of the House and a member of Congress. So it wasn't a race-based purpose, a primarily race-based purpose that they were doing it. They were doing it primarily for a political purpose, which is okay, which is to protect their Speaker of the House and their leadership position of their other member of Congress. So that's how the this case, the Calais case, as they call it, came through and has been heard. What's interesting is the question is, what will the Supreme Court justices do? Because we know that, when the Alabama case came through, the Milligan case came through, that Justice Roberts and Justice Kavanaugh all both went with the more progressive side of the ticket to get that through. The question is, will they stay there? And both Justice Roberts and Justice Kavanaugh certainly have given indications that there should be some type of time frame, a sunset provision, if you will, on Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 65. And the question is, will they set that into place in this case? Will this be a part of what they're trying to put in place? So that's what's going on in this case. If we broke it down to everyday, sort of terms, the question would be, is the primary purpose behind creating the second majority minority district, is it race or is it politics? That's the question that really needs to be answered here.
Well, what is it? I mean, because I'm wondering, with Justice Roberts, who believes that you don't need to protect voting rights because America is very different than it was in 1965, he said, please, we've had a black president. So basically, racism and race-centered decisions are behind us, and we know that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and really, to me, it is more about having, I wish you had a district where you had poor people, just poor folks. So you send someone poor, someone working class to Congress. How about that part? I mean, how does Joe Manchin represent West Virginia? A very wealthy man. I mean, heaven help him, but ultimately, the people need to be represented.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have been historically excluded, the fact is we've always had race-based decisions. They just didn't favor people who were not white.
Right.
I mean, so what are we talking about here? I mean, really, what is this about?
Well, I think that in its essence, there are two things that are going on. One is the protection of their power, because they're afraid of what the federal courts would do if they redraw those lines, that they lose, that the House Speaker ends up in a contested race where he could potentially lose. They're concerned that Steve Scalise ends up in a contested race where he could potentially lose. That's one of their real concerns. The other concern is this, and let's understand this. The House of Representatives right now, there's a razor thin margin that has the Republicans that are controlling the House of Representatives. When you begin to whittle away at that, I think it's maybe a 3-person difference that's there, that becomes incredibly, incredibly powerful. And so, when you talk about increasing what would in all probability be a Democrat that's coming out of this new majority minority district, that's reducing the power that they're going to have in that House of Representatives. And that's the essence of the argument of what's going on here. It's the power and the control of the House of Representatives.
Well, I mean, but the thing is, the politics are dynamic. They're not static.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I've been reading several articles, one in Politico, that says, wait a minute, Democrats, we've been digging down on the numbers, and you have more trouble than you think. I mean, we're in an environment, while the president has withdrawn Congresswoman Stefanik from consideration as UN ambassador, he said, we've got to hold on to this thin majority, which is why he's doing executive orders, because he doesn't have the votes. Mm-hmm. Which is why the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys are wandering the halls and wandering around Congress, wandering around the Hill. Their presence is physically intimidating to the members of Congress. And I keep telling you all that because I think we need to understand the context in which people are governing. Because these same people are going home and they are being assailed by their constituents. Mm-hmm. They're like, wait a minute, I need you. They're telling Republicans and Democrats, I need you to do your job. Period. That's what I need. So no one can depend upon anything. I mean, and so why not just be fair? How can you have a third of your state have Not even. I mean, sir. I mean, proportional representation ought to be the goal, but you don't even have that. How are you gonna have one congressperson out of Louisiana that represents black people? Are you serious?
And what it does, Santita, is that it also raises the consciousness of and the importance and stresses the importance of state-based elections, right? Because one of the things that we know is that when we're drawing these congressional districts, the congressional districts are drawn by the state government, right? By the state elected officials, and so to the degree that they can have districts that are drawn that dilute the vote of minorities, of black voters, of voters of color, of young voters, whatever it is, to the degree that they can dilute those voters and that vote count increases their power and the ability to have more representatives that they're able to give safe districts to so that they can control Congress, so they can control the state houses. That's what this is all about. It's all an issue of control. And what we continue to see happening across this country is that the Republican Party is really the minority party in this country, but they've been able to skillfully and manipulatively, run for offices and local offices and state offices, understanding that through that local and state office, they can then draw the districts from which people are determined to be elected, and they can put in place as few majority minority districts as possible, which of course flies in the face of proportional representation of folks that are in Congress, of folks that are in the state house, and everywhere else. So that's the essence of what we see happening here, and that's really what's at issue. Interestingly, in this case, in the Clay's case, Press Robinson, who was the original plaintiff in this case, I guess Mr. Robinson must be in his late 70s or 80s now, but he's been on the battlefield for a long time, and he is one of the people that has been pushing forward for this inclusive representation in Congress and this inclusive district. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out because the African Americans in Louisiana. Let's also understand this, right? That the district that we're talking about in the Callis case, after the state legislature indicated that it was okay for this to go through and that they drew the district themselves, there was an election based on the district. So we have a representative that is in place that has come out of the district that the state legislature have put together. So what the Supreme Court now is deciding is whether or not that congressional member was constitutionally elected, or they're now going to go through the process of
what are they going to do? Put him out?
I mean, of course, they run every 2 years, so they'll be up in the 2026 election. But the question
is this Cleo Fields?
I believe this would be Fields. That's correct.
Yes, yeah, because he was gerrymandered out of his seat, and that was driven in part by the Landros. Yes, the mayor of New Orleans and the former senator. Yes, and then they redrew the lines, and he got back in. Doesn't that tell you something?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these people are hungry for representation. What is this? I mean, because I'm just trying to. I'm also concerned about it going to the Supreme Court.
And you should be. And you should.
Why should we all be concerned about this case going to the Supreme Court?
What we know about this Supreme Court is a very conservative Supreme Court, and obviously it's dominated with a conservative majority. And we know that the Milligan case, which was the Alabama case that dealt with the same issue, was able to come up with their additional majority minority district only because of Roberts and Kavanaugh, Justices Roberts and Kavanaugh voting for them. What we know also is that, and this is some of the inside politics, right, of the court. What we also know is that Justice Kavanaugh was very shaky on that vote. It was questionable whether or not he was going to try to bring it back for reconsideration on that decision. If there was a way that they could have plaintiffs come forward to challenge that Supreme Court decision. This could be that case that Justice Kavanaugh was looking for to come back and change his decision that he did in the Milligan case. This could very well be that case. And if it is that case, and this is why I say we're on shaky ground. This is the reason that everyone is so concerned about the Calais case. It's because we know that Justice Kavanaugh was very shaky on the Milligan case. It's a 5-4 decision that's needed. We have the 3 progressive justices that are there. The question is, where will Justice Roberts and Justice Kavanaugh continue to stand with them? Will they continue to stand for the belief in the Voting Rights Act of 65 and Section 2 in particular? So all of that is what's at play. It's highly suspected that Kavanaugh is the weaker link of the 2, and the question is, what will Roberts do? So there's a big Justice Roberts do. So it's a big question that's open right there, Santita, as to what will happen with this case. What is clear is that it could not be more important than ever. Right now, it's more important than ever that we get out and that we're certain that, when we have the opportunity to vote, to register to vote, that we do it, and that we try to put in place candidates and elected officials that want that, that inclusive multiracial democracy, that they want to have that inclusive democracy, not something that's closed off for the specific few.
But you know what? One of the things that concerns me is that we cannot forget the component of this movement that has had us politically organizing and marching. Mm-hmm. The Brown versus Board of Education decision happened within a context. And the context was just after, you're coming out of the Second World War, mm-hmm. when Black people were restless, and they were not, they said, look, we said we'd go to the Second World War. We were not going to go because we were being lynched. We were having to live under Jim Crow, American apartheid. The South Africans learned from us, right? That's how the South African apartheid system is based upon Jim Crow. Mm-hmm. And so Black people came back from the Second World War and said, wait. We agreed that we would have the Double V campaign, victory at home, victory abroad. Now we need you to come through for us. Mm-hmm. So Black people were pushing, Black people primarily. But we were not rainbowed up. We were pushing. And we were in these streets because that was part of the tension between Thurgood Marshall and Dr. King. Mm-hmm. Because he just felt all we need to do is go to the courts. It's like, no. If you don't have street heat, this thing is not going to work. Because my point is the courts also respond to the politics of the day.
Right.
So we've got to do, and you understand because you do both. We've got to do both. Mm-hmm. Because Cleo Fields just got back. And I didn't realize that Congressman Fields, who I have known, we have known each other since college. I didn't realize he was only there 4 years. Mm-hmm. And then they maneuvered him out. Yeah, and I keep calling the Landrieux names because that's what they did. They did that. People depend upon the Black vote to become mayor of New Orleans, to become the senator from the great state of Louisiana. And they gerrymandered him and Black people out of power. And I'm salty about that today. And he just got back in. And now he could be pushed back out. Mm-hmm. Come on, what is this? So, I'm saying there's got to be, you got to have, I'm looking at Kavanaugh, I'm looking at Roberts, but I also know, wait a minute, if they do not see us moving, nothing is going to move.
Right. You're right on it, Santita. The old saying that they used to say is that a closed mouth doesn't get fed. Right. So, if you're not going to have your voice heard, if you're not going to speak up, no one's going to know that there's a problem. They're going to think that it's okay, that you're fine with it. You haven't said anything. If you're upset about something, you're going to say something that you're upset about. So, that becomes certainly a big part of it. And so that's why it's so important that, that people show up in the streets, that they show up at the ballot box, that they show up at the community meetings, they show up, whenever you get the opportunity, email your representative, call your representative, whatever it is that you can do. Because if you are quiet, they're going to think that you're fine, or they're not going to consider you at all. No one can figure out, they're not mind readers. They're not going to sit there and say, this is what the majority is thinking. The majority needs to speak up. in order for it to be heard. And that's why, we do what we do in the streets, so that we go to the members in their districts and have rallies and have different events that go on to let the members know that the people that elected them, these are their concerns. This is what they're saying. Listen to the people. That's what representative government is all about. The Supreme Court is not immune from that. And I think so beautifully laid it out. It's when the Supreme Court sees what's happening in the streets that it realizes that it's got to act, and it realizes generally we want them to act in concert with what the people are thinking. Sometimes they don't, but it's important that they know what many of the people are thinking, and the actions that are going on in the streets. They've got to know the impact of the decisions that they're making. I would certainly indicate that when it came to reproductive rights, they weren't hearing it. They weren't hearing what folks were saying. But I think that as state by state, I think it's 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 states now that had reproductive rights that were on the ballot all voted in favor of reproductive rights. At some point, the people will get the representatives into the House of Representatives and into the Senate, so that it is codified on a federal level as a right to reproductive rights. But the Supreme Court is not immune from hearing what people are saying, Santita.
Well, think about the Civil War. I mean, you got the slave amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, and then the 20th, in which women got the right to vote. This was happening in a time of political tumult and activity in America. And the court does have to respond because America is a living, breathing institution. We're not who we were in 1789. We're not who we were in 1619. I mean, when people say that things have not changed, Daryl, nothing could be further from the truth. A lot has changed. Mm-hmm. A lot more needs to change, but a lot has changed. Nobody here has been at a colored fountain. No one here has. All of us have seen. They have mixed marriages and mixed couples on TV all the time. I remember when I was a little girl, when I think Days of Our Lives had the first interracial couple. That was in the late 70s. That was a huge deal. They made the cover of Jet. Wow. Yeah. Because when I think about it, that was not even 10 years after the Loving decision. Mm-hmm. But even the Loving decision happened in a context. I'm making the point, and I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a layperson. But I know that it takes, but I understand the movement, the civil rights movement, in all of its different wings and, areas. And I know about the different tensions. It doesn't mean the people didn't like each other and did not appreciate each other's contributions, and sometimes they didn't like each other. That's a fact, but they agreed that we needed to move the people forward and move the country forward. Okay, but there was a tension between the legal wing and, say, the people who did the street heat, SELC, SNCC, mm-hmm. CORE, Congress of Racial Equality, all those people who were doing the freedom rides and all of that. And because sometimes the lawyers who are more conservative, I get it, I said, wait, we got this. We said, no, we've got to push this. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering now if we need to go back there, because we are under assault, Daryl Jones. I mean, I think it's fair to say, it's funny. When you look at DEI, I hear my brother, Congressman Jackson, talking about it all the time, because he continues to amplify that while Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, mm-hmm. said no DEI, no more. But the carve out from the U.S. Supreme Court was for the military. They said, no DEI any place except the military. Daryl, I mean, so I can die for you, but I can't get an education. Oh, okay. So all right, I got it. I could be on the front line. Thank you. So, I mean, so I'm looking at Kavanaugh, I'm looking at Roberts, and, Roberts can sometimes surprise you. Mm-hmm. Like Amy Coney Barrett can sometimes. This court can surprise you sometimes. I don't know what that's about, It's above my pay grade, but it is what it is. If you were a betting man, where do you see this going? Or just give me two different scenarios.
I think that if I was a betting man, and I am not a betting man, but if I were if I were a
You know,
betting
you go
man,
to Atlantic City for that.
I'm not too far away. But if I were a betting man, here is the problem and the concern is that traditionally, as you've indicated, lawyers by profession, we're really pretty conservative, and for the most part, once we see precedent that's set, meaning that they've litigated, they've heard, and the court has written out a decision as to how they believe a case should be done and what the law should be, they stick with that precedent. Milligan versus Alabama, that's that precedent. This court ain't showing that kind of grit. They're not showing that type of foundation. They're not showing that type of practice. So we don't know if they will. And this is the scary part. We don't know if they're going to stick to their own precedent. This is the same court that decided Milligan is the same court that's now going to be deciding the Callis case. And the issues, like I said, are parallel to one another. Perhaps the Callis case is even a little more weightier toward, erring on the favor or ruling on the favor of the state. Because
let people know what the Callis case is.
The Callis case is the Louisiana case that we're talking about. The Callis case is the case where Louisiana now makes up a third of the population of the state of Louisiana. They've only had one African-American representative that's in a majority-minority district. And so now there's been a second majority-minority district that has been proposed and has been created by the state legislature in Louisiana. And the U.S. District Court has said that this is okay with what is there, understanding that if the state legislature did not create the second majority-minority district, that the U.S. District Court judge themselves, three-member panel, would create that district. So wanting to protect their Speaker of the House, right, Mike Johnson, wanting to protect Steve Scalise, the other majority, I believe, in the House Appropriations Committee, they created this meandering, the snake-like second majority-minority district. So that's what the Calais case is all about. And so, the question is, will this Supreme Court continue with the precedent that it itself put in place in 2024 in Alabama? That's the real question. And I can't, I don't begin.
Justify not doing it.
You justify not going it. We know that Justice Kavanaugh has already indicated that there needs to be some type of sunset provision for the Voting Rights Act. That it shouldn't continue ad infinitum. And he believes as well that, the question is in his mind, and I think we may have said it a little earlier, is the Voting Rights Act still necessary? That's the question that Justice Kavanaugh, and Justice Roberts want to have answered.
Isn't that the question that they're really wrestling with? Is at the core of this? Is that what they're wrestling with?
That really is the core of it. If they could and do it quickly and quietly, they would eviscerate the Voting Rights Act of
the whole thing,
because they don't believe it's necessary at all.
Wait a minute. All. No, back up, because I want people to understand the Voting Rights Act and why LBJ, President Johnson, deemed it necessary, right? Mm-hmm. Please help us to understand, because we've got the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Our right to vote had not been enforced for 95 years. Mm-hmm. Would you explain that?
Yeah, because, what is happening, Santita, is that with the Voting Rights Act of 65, what had happened during a period of time was that, that's when we had all the bubbles in a bar of soap and all this other, poll tax and all these other requirements that were being thrown up, and the essential purpose
and threatening to kill you if you tried to vote.
Oh, the
right?
Ku Klux Klan comes about, right? Because the Ku Klux Klan comes about voting rights and about blacks exercising that vote to right and trying to scare them and to terrorize them so that they would not exercise the right to vote. The Voting Rights Act of '65 comes about, and it's really intended to prohibit voting practices or procedures that would discriminate against voters of color, or and later down the road, those that have a different primary language. Their primary language is something other than English. So that's what the Voting Rights Act was essentially deemed to do. That was the purpose of it. That's what they were pushing for, was to be certain that people were not being threatened at the polls or not being given tests at the polls and all the other stuff that was going on, so that their votes were being suppressed. That's what it was all about. And that's what we're seeing happen today. It's not necessarily to that degree, but what we're seeing happen today are other ways that the vote is being suppressed, beginning with a lot of the voter identification and voter voting rights with regards to identification at the polls. One of the things that's coming up right now, as we're talking about it, and the executive order just came out from the president, is dealing with voting rights. And what the president wants to do is that he wants proof of U.S. citizenship before you can actually register and be able to vote. Proof of U.S. citizenship would come by having your passport, would come by having your original birth certificate, not a copy. That wouldn't be sufficient. You'd have to,
that.
and a driver's license would not be sufficient unless it's one of those real IDs and has that marking. That's the only proof of U.S. citizenship that would be acceptable under this executive order. And it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that, because another thing that this executive order will do is that it's going to move all of the voting information that all the states are housing and collecting. It would move it to the Department of Homeland Security. It would be under them.
So what does that mean?
Why? Why are you moving all of the voting information to Homeland Security for safekeeping? Okay, for safekeeping. So the federal government then would have access to all of the voting information that each of the states have, and who knows what would happen with it from there.
Wait a minute. Hold on, wait, because my mind is racing. Homeland Security. Does that mean that the vote's supposed to be secret, right?
Mm-hmm.
Although I never really believe that it is. Yeah, I said it. What is it? I mean, are there implications for guarding your privacy with respect to the vote by going to Homeland Security? Because to me, they have the power to find out anything about you.
And I mean,
I'm just a layperson. I don't know.
Yeah, but you hit the nail right on the head, as because we know that the Department of Homeland Security comes under the provinces of the president. And the question is, what do they get access to? And what do they do with the information that they have access to? So that's one of the major concerns that's there. But the executive order doesn't stop there, Santita, because the executive order also says that if you are doing an absentee or a ballot, one of the mail-in ballots, if your ballot doesn't arrive by election day, it can't be counted. That's part of this executive order that's there. If your ballot is not there by election day, it does not get counted. So that's part of this executive order as well.
While they have unplugged the Postal Service.
Precisely.
So it's not it's not the postal workers' fault that their collective fault that you're not getting, that it's taking more time to get your mail. Remember, the sorting machines were disabled. They have unplugged, they're collapsing Social Security. They're saying that some people are going to have to wait months and months, Daryl, before they get their checks.
Mm-hmm.
Months and months. Many people are now they're going to stop delivering our mail every day. So the implications for this, to me, they're astounding. I mean, I know I'm stopping you at every little thing, but see, you're a brilliant guy and you really understand the system. I have to ask, because at every juncture, you're giving me something that's making me ask questions. It's like, wait. Homeland Security, why do they need to have my voting information? Why? Something about that is unsettling to me.
And there's no rational relation as to why Homeland Security would have it. Let's be clear: Homeland Security is not an expert in dealing with the storage of voter information or any of that. That's not what they do. That's not what they're charged to do. And let's also be clear that that's one of the parts that's being reduced in government. They're reducing the Homeland Security. So you're giving more responsibility, yet you're reducing their staffing ability. It doesn't make sense. What does make sense is that it makes it very questionable as to what the administration is actually up to and trying to get a hold of all of these states' information and on voting rights and trying to get access to that information. That is something that I think that in my mind does make a lot of sense and raises a lot of red flags and certainly says proceed with caution, proceed with caution.
Well, see, that's why I ask you, going back to Attorney Gerald Briggs out of Atlanta, out of Georgia, the president of the NAACP in Georgia, he was pressing for 4 years for the Biden administration to give us an executive order to protect our voting rights. At least it would have put it in the conversation. I know it would only last for the duration of his presidency, of that presidency, but it would have put this in the conversation, Daryl. Or am I incorrect?
No, you're 100% correct. Now, let me tell you what else it would have done. If former President Biden had issued the executive order on voting rights, it would have raised the bar, right, for another president to come in and say, I'm going to discontinue voting rights.
Say that one more time. You were cut off.
It raises the bar for another president to come in and say, I am going to discontinue this order that requires these issues or these standards for voting rights. I'm going to remove that. That immediately causes concern amongst the folks, right? Amongst the population. Why do you feel the necessity to remove the executive order that guarantees voting rights for everyone? And that everyone will be operating by the same set of rules. What are you doing? What are you up to? That's the question that would have been raised had former President Biden put in place an executive order and then a subsequent president come in and say, I'm going to remove that executive order.
So where are we now? Because you have a court that, quite honestly, they are a conservative court. And many people call this, and you help me with this as a lawyer, they say it's the Thomas Court now. Right? First of all, why do they call, as in Clarence Thomas, why do they call this the Thomas Court?
Santita, about 2 years ago, I started calling this the Thomas Court. And generally what happens is this: whoever the Chief Justice is of the Supreme Court, they usually call it that court. For instance, right now, the Chief Justice is John Roberts. And so Justice Roberts, they should be called the Roberts Court, meaning that the majority of the justices, if there's any question, they're going to follow the Chief Justice to lead them through. The Chief Justice holds the power. The Chief Justice really is going to be guiding the decisions of the court in close cases. They're calling this the Thomas Court now because Justice Thomas is the ringleader, if you will, for the conservative movement, for that conservative thought, that conservative philosophy, and everything that he's been pushing through the courts seems to be coming through the courts, and so many of the conservative justices have been siding with Justice Thomas in those decisions. And although on the minority side of it, in the Milligan decision, Justice Thomas was against Evan Milligan and the creation of the additional district in the state of Alabama. So, we see this now coming forward. Is this a chance now in the Louisiana case, the Calais case, for Justice Thomas's voice to now really become full-throated and heard completely in Louisiana, thus overturning the one that he was in the minority, the case in which he was in the minority in Alabama?
Where are we with our voting rights? Are we going to have them? What is going to happen with the court? Do they have the final say, or are they going to kick this back to the states? And if they kick it back to the states, what does that mean? Or if they take it upon themselves, what happens?
Right. So if the Supreme Court in the Louisiana case, if they decide on the side in favor of the state of Louisiana, right? The state of Louisiana, which is asking for the creation of the second majority minority district, nothing's lost, right? And, it's a big gain for the Voting Rights Act community, et cetera. Unless there's percolating through the system another case that's going to be challenging the Voting Rights Act, and which you can always rest assured there's another case that's percolating that's out there that the court may be looking at to say that's the case that we want to use. But as it stands right now, I suspect that this court, by probably a very narrow margin, probably 5-4, will find in favor of the state of Louisiana, which will leave the.
So this favors Speaker Johnson, and this will keep Cleo Fields in.
That's correct. That would keep everyone in place. It would take care of the speaker. It would take care of the appropriations leader Scalise. It would also take care of Representative Fields. Right? All of that would remain.
Wait a minute. Is that why they're saying that this is an odd case, because it has the right wing and the left wing as strange bedfellows?
Exactly, because everyone's trying to protect their power base, and they recognize that if the if the state of Louisiana had not enacted the legislation and the creation of this redistricting that created the second majority minority district, then the federal judge that might put this district together may put together a district that would challenge Speaker Johnson as well as Representative Scalise.
So they're tied to each other.
They're all tied. They're all in the same bed, just on different sides.
Under the same covers.
Perhaps separate pillows. I don't know.
I don't know. As long, I'm looking for adequate representation. Because the House of Representatives should have been expanded long ago. People in America are woefully underrepresented, Daryl Jones. How? Because even beyond this, I think we've got to move that along. I don't think most Americans are aware of the fact that the framers said, yes, the House of Representatives starts here. We didn't always have a U.S. Senate. It was just the people's house. And I think the Senate is like a little bit more than 100 years old, right?
Right.
So, okay, you had the people's house, and it was supposed to grow with the population. We're disenfranchising people as we speak. Yeah. So just given the work that you do, and of course, you can hear Attorney Daryl Jones and Attorney Barbara Arnwine on WOL in D.C., 12 noon Eastern Standard Time every Tuesday. And hey, if you want to see them on TV, let CNN and MSNBC know that too. It's important, because otherwise, if you don't ask, you don't get. Okay, you have not because you've asked not, and we need more voices in the space. But the number one television network now is, guess what? YouTube. Did you know that? So yeah. So come on, we're in the right place. Everybody, like and share, like and share, like and share. So so you tell me. Just how do we move this along? Because it seems to me that we're at a crossroads, Daryl. Who are we going to be as a nation? Are we going to include more people, or are we going to exclude more people? Are we going to grow, or are we going to contract?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. We are at that crossroads, and we talk about African American representation, Latino American, people of color, their representation in Congress. Who the least represented is in Congress?
Indigenous,
Gen Z, and young millennials. You know how many Gen Zs there are in Congress? One. There's one. There's one. Right, Matthew Frost out of Florida. That's it. If you were going just by the numbers, just by population, there should be at least 25% representation of Gen Z. Yes, of Gen Z that's in Congress. So, but they have one. So that's the least representative. But one of the things that we go around the country saying is that the most important thing to do is to build coalitions. And in order to build the coalitions, you've got to understand you know, what it is that you need to know and what it is that you don't know. And you've got to be open to learning. And, you know, one of the things, particularly in the Gen Z community, is that, you know, they don't believe that they have power. They don't recognize when you put the young millennials and the Gen Zs together, that's the largest potential voting bloc in the United States. Young millennials and Gen Zs, the largest potential voting bloc in the United States. So, you know, it's a matter of educating them of that information. But equally important is, you know, as we go from community to community, you know, folks always think that there's nothing I can do. I'm just here in, you know, name your city, you know, name your state, United States of America. I'm not a fellow representative. I don't have the abilities to be on that federal level. Well, what happens in a federal government level happens because of what's happening on the local level. Okay. It's because of the redistricting that's happened. It's because of the districts that are drawn that make the determination as to what member it goes to the U.S. House of Representatives. Obviously, U.S. senators are statewide positions, so that goes by your state. But your U.S. House of Representatives, that's the people's person. Whoever that representative is, that's the people's person. That's the reason that's why they call it the U.S. House of Representatives, representing the people. It's the people's person. And so it becomes so important for folks that are, you know, part of community groups, community organizations, to be certain that you're holding your elected officials responsible and accountable. And if they're not being responsive to your needs, to find someone to replace them, to run against them that will represent your needs and certainly hear your calls for concern. If they're not holding town halls, then you need to hold a town hall and hold them accountable for not holding town halls. That's what needs to happen. Don't wait for them to hold the meeting. You hold the meeting. That's how this works. You know, we've got to be certain that if we want the people's voice to be heard, again, we go back to saying that a closed mouth doesn't get fed. You got to open your mouth and let them know that you're concerned, that this is a problem, that this is an issue, and you've got to be heard. Once you're heard locally, you'll be heard in your state, and you'll be heard federally, because that's the way the chain goes. It goes up, not down. It goes up. And we've got to remember that the ultimate holder of the power are the people of the United States, not the elected representatives.
Well, you know, I don't think it could be said any better than that. Is there anything else you want to say that we should be looking out for? Because now people are having town hall meetings all over the place. It seems that Americans want and need to be engaged, and keep looking at your cell phone, because tomorrow we are going to be looking at this Politico article. We dug into the polls. Democrats in Congress should be very afraid. Nobody is safe right now, everybody. All bets are off as these checks dry up, as these jobs get eliminated, with no plan to re-educate people so that they can get other jobs. See, as a little girl, I stayed over in Denmark for several months. And I knew it was important, but I guess I didn't. I had to become a full-grown adult to really understand how important it was. There, if you were fired from your job or you wanted to leave your job, the government would send you to school to be re-educated, so you could get another job. That's not happening here. We just have some people, the big tech bros, briefly talking about AI, and we're going to automate. But people are not, you know, we can't have a world without people, Daryl. Mm-hmm. I mean, so you tell me, because you can't have America, I guess, without voters.
That's it. I have, you know, it's the voter that makes America America, and what makes America great is the voice of the people. And if the voice of the people isn't being heard, you're not going to have a great America. And so, you know, one of the big things, though, when we're talking about the voice of the people and people being heard, and I always encourage everyone to remember those that are court impacted voters, right? Those that have felonies on their records. And it changes state by state as to whether or not they have the ability to vote. Why do we do that? That makes no sense to me at all. Why not just have one way, one standard by which we make that determination? For instance, in the state of Maryland, if your feet are in the street, you have the right to vote. If your feet are in the street, you have the right to vote. That should be across the board. At a minimum, that if your feet are in the street, you have the right to vote. And if you're feeling angry and anxious at this moment because of all that's going on, we talked about folks being laid off and not being being taught or given other trades, other skills, retrained, that type of thing. But let's also remember this, that the Department of Education is under attack in the country as well. And so they're going to be, really sort of hatching down and leaning down and scaling down what the Federal Department of Education can do and the abilities that are there. If you're one of those people that are being laid off because you're a federal worker, if you're a student right now across the United States and you're discriminated against in any form or any fashion because of your disability, because of your race, because of your sex, all of that is not going to be able to be investigated by the Department of Education anymore because they're scaling it all down. What's happening right now is that there's a call that's out this Saturday, April the 5th. This Saturday, April the 5th, there are going to be movements all across this country that are saying no more, to stop the movement, to stop what's going on, to stop this negative frame that we're in across this country with the oligarchy type of movement that's there, that is silencing the voices of the citizens. April the 5th, and if you go to tjcoalition.org, we will have more information posted with regards to this movement on Saturday, April the 5th. You can't be on the sidewalks complaining about what's happening in the streets. You got to get into the street to stop the action, to be a part of it. And that's what the big encouragement is right now, Santita, is to get off of the sidewalks, get into the street, raise your voice, let them know that you object. Be Congressman Al Green, raise your cane and say, I object. No, this ain't happening. I'm not having it, Santita.
And raise some cane and get out and vote today, everybody. If you're in Wisconsin, get out and vote today. Get out and vote. Get out and vote. If you're in other states where they're having elections, get out and vote. Get out and vote. And get other people to vote and get engaged. Attorney Darrell Jones said, have town hall meetings. And if the representative on the state, local, or county, or federal level do not show up, have an empty chair. The government is not formed by us. That's the genius and the beauty of America. We really do run things. I don't think we really understand that as much as we should. This country is ours. This land is your land. It's my land. From California to New York Island. Hey, this land was made for you and me. And it was made by you and me. So come on, everybody. Let's get involved. WOLDC, everybody, every Tuesday, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. Some of the best radio, some of the greatest information you can find. Barbara Arnwine and Attorney Darrell Jones. I had to put her first. I love Attorney Arnwine, but we love you, Darrell Jones. Everybody get out and vote. And if you have any challenges, if people have challenges at the polls today, what should they do?
If you have challenges at the polls, the first thing you can do is call 866-OUR-VOTE, 866-OUR-VOTE. And there are people that are there that were manning the lines waiting to help you. Particularly if you're in Wisconsin, this will be in Wisconsin for that Supreme Court election. This is already the most money ever spent on a Supreme Court election in U.S. history. Elon Musk is on the ballot in Wisconsin. He's the one who's bankrolling the Republican that's running out there for the state of Wisconsin. So,
and to be fair, George Soros on the left.
And George Soros on the rest. Absolutely.
And I want dark money. I want all these. I want to have a publicly funded system so that poor folks can run. I didn't say poor people. I said poor folks. So the poor folks, seriously, because we won't have this problem.
That's right.
If you take these folks out the mix, I'm sorry. I'm tired of all of it, Darrell.
Yeah, I agree. We need the best thoughts. We need those that are carrying forward the best thoughts, those that are carrying forward the interests of the public, the general public, everybody in the public, the majority of them. That's what we call the democracy, right? Whoever has the majority of the thought is in the majority of the opinion. That's the person that should be sitting in that judge seat. That's the person that should be sitting in the congressional seat. That's the person that should be elected, Santita.
That's right. That's right. So come on, everybody. Let's get with the program. And that's right. Support PBS and NPR. I hear you, Robert Williams. We need that. And we need you to support independent radio and independent media, really. And do the research, everybody. Don't be too busy to take care of busyness. That's important. You're not a subject, you're a citizen. If you're a subject, you let other people do the work for you. If you're a citizen, we got to all be involved. That's the only way this works. Barbara Arnwine and attorney Daryl Jones, every Tuesday, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time on WOL. Check them out, give them your support. I'll see you in the next hour for the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Get out and vote, get out and vote, get out and vote.